And we're live to talk about an episode of... Yes, please subscribe. Please subscribe. To talk about an episode of Homicide, which... Was this the first one, Jeff, where they brought in... Because what I saw on Wikipedia was like... The story was by Fontana and Knight, but it said teleplay by... And was it by a new person? Because the dialogue seemed to be... didn't have the sparkle of previous episodes.
Well, I looked that up. Written by Jorge Zamacona, based on a story by Zamacona and executive producer Tom Fontana. So yeah, I think there was at least one in the first couple of seasons that he co-wrote or something. He was involved in it, but I don't remember if he got full writer's credit on it.
Just like that. It just like that sparkle. I mean, there was like so much sparkle in the first episode, and then 2 or 3 in that first season, where it was like this really nice, sparkling dialogue. And this was, I mean, I like the content of the opening scene, but even that, and then all, like all the storyline with the restaurant, and that would have been, I imagine that kind of thing would have been a lot better dialogue in previous episodes, because I could have seen those characters in those situations being a lot funnier. So that bit was disappointing, and I just thought that. Yeah, go on.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, and then something else I thought as well is that as I was about halfway through, I think this is taking a long time. It's going to be because I didn't know it was like a 2-parter or something. I was like, this is dragging out a bit long, and then it just ended, and I thought, oh, it's a 2-parter. That's why it seemed to be so slow in the second half. I think I've done that. Said dull second half. Yeah, there seemed to be padding as well, where it dragged in. There was a couple of good scenes about where, but I just think that the dialogue was better in, and I think this is the dullest dialogue of any episode I've seen so far in terms of style. I think that's pretty much it as far as my comments, but I do remember quite a bit of the plot and things that happened. I'll give it about 5 because I did get through it.
So I mean, does that mean you want to end the video then, or?
Oh no! I was just want to see your point of view on it and extra information and stuff like that.
Okay, well, what I was thinking that we would do was talk a little about the first 2 seasons.
Oh, that's fine. That's great. I like them.
But kind of threw me off because I didn't know you were gonna do that. But
yeah, that's fine because that's great because it's a nice little contrast by what I was saying about the dialogue being good in previous episodes, pretty much all the previous ones.
Well, I mean, I guess the main thing, because I mean, I've seen all these before, so I kind of wanted to get from you sort of the same thing that I did about Blake 7, as I guess, just what your general thoughts were for the first, 13.
Oh, okay. Oh, excellent. I'll say that first time I watched the first episode, it was hard for me to pick up the rhythms of understanding what people are like, especially Meldrick Lewis. I think that's his name. And but like the second time I heard it was like loads of good stuff in the pilot, and it was like, as you say, like the guy with the polystyrene saying buried like a hamburger, and lots of really good stuff in there, and then Munch saying I'm not Montel Williams, and like loads of good lines, probably about 20 at least quotable lines in the first episode. What do you think in terms of quotable lines in the first episode?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot throughout the the series, but yeah, I think it was It definitely grabs from the first episode, in my opinion. You know, it's right into it. There's a lot of stuff to chew on, as they say.
And it's not just like, I mean, as you said before, when a lot of sitcoms where it's like one liner, one liner, one liner, it's like most of that was like character based, funny dialogue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you go right into, you know, joining the homicide squad, and it seems like it's a real police department, and the people have their own ways of doing things, but they have to, you know, get along to a point, and it's just, you know, I think what I said at the time was that it's like any job, you know, and that's kind of the point. Is like people think of, well, you know, somebody who works in a factory or in an office or whatever, you know, that does a job that nobody talks about much. You know, they would think of something like being a cop, or especially investigating murders, as being like this, you know, important job. And I'm not saying it isn't an important job, but there's kind of a recurring theme right from the start with Homicide that it still is just a job to these guys. They're like, you know, they're doing their job like anybody else, and this is how they do it, and they're not going to be wowed by things the way, you know, somebody who hasn't seen a bunch of dead bodies and stuff is going to be. You know,
I think it would like put people off wanting to be going to the police. It would put me off. I mean, Columbo like makes it. Oh, that's interesting, but like a battle of wits with, but like this, it's like depressing.
I don't find it depressing, which is part of the reason why I like it so much. Because
not the whole show. I just thought the aspects of like, imagine like going in, finding all that tragedy, and like being exposed to the dark side of human nature every day.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know. It's funny to me because I guess, you know, I don't feel like that was ever completely foreign to me, and maybe that's a reason why I relate to Pendleton, that I feel like I already knew even when I was a kid about the dark side of things. It was always present to me.
And you experienced it firsthand.
So to me, it was just a matter of like expanding my sort of knowledge of my surroundings, I guess you could say, in terms of what you know. It's on another of my favorite shows, My So-Called Life. There's in the pilot episode of that, the main character says something about you know, she's is a teenager, and she's like saying adults always ask you how was school, and she said it's like asking how was that drive-by shooting. You know, you're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt like, you know, pretty much all my life. You know, and some people would probably laugh at that who lived in circumstances where, you know, they were maybe in a more turbulent area, or there was, you know, more constant violence, or, you know, gang stuff going on, or things like that. But as a kid, you don't know anyone else's life other than your own. So,
well, you know what? You know what other kids.
Well, you know what other kids to a point, but it's still like you're still through your lens, whatever it is you experience. And so you don't have that, you know, the lens is not a wide angle for most kids. You know, they're seeing very much like in front of them what's going on. And what I've learned, of course, after learning, you know, typology stuff, is that some kids have a wider lens than others. And from, you know, I would say of the people I've talked to, that, you know, NF types are like the most reflective on on aspects of life as they're growing up, and things that I didn't really think about until much older. They would ponder at very young ages.
The way I experienced it in school was like I suppose it's, you were saying there, it's like people don't know the negative aspects of like other children's like home lives, but it's like the grass is probably always green, and like, oh, this kid's always going on holiday, they have all this, because I grew up quite poor, couldn't afford to go on holiday, we couldn't afford to have heating on in the winter because of the expense. We didn't have central heating, the bathroom wasn't heated, But to me, it was also an era where we saw the terrible poverty in Ethiopia. Do you remember the Ethiopian famine and Band-Aid and Live Aid and all of that? And like and we actually saw the report in 1984, and like, I can't watch all of it now because it showed all these like emaciated figures, you know, in the refugee camps in Ethiopia in 1984. So I had that sort of perspective, and to me it was like all of these like parents never had a car, and like all these other kids, it's like a normal thing for them to have cars, and just that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, it's a lot about perspective.
But I never had abusive parents, though. I mean, I wouldn't swap with your parents, because your father seems like hell.
Sometimes. But anyway, so did you have anything else to say about the, season 1 and 2?
Oh, yeah, I have a lot to say about the seasons, just not about the episode we just seen. Because it's like almost in total contrast in terms of the quality of the dialogue. I mean, it was okay in the episode we just seen, but like
I'm a bit surprised by that because I actually was thinking as I watched it, well, Ben will like this one because there's a lot of humor in it, and you always talk about you like the funnier ones. I mean, I laughed a bunch of times in the episode myself, like a lot from the bits like, you know, Bayless thinking that they were talking about him, and you know, all the stuff like you talked about with them trying to do the bar stuff. I thought all that was hilarious, and once again showed the character moments because we got you know, Bolender sticking to his ISTJ station. I'm not going to risk my pension on your bar.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's just it didn't have the sparkle. That's why I was slightly disappointed by it. It's like this should be funny as previous episodes. This storyline, it's just it didn't have the way the characters would phrase things, their turn of phrase, like especially from someone like Meldrick, and he does a fantastic turn of phrase, and like being humorous, and I mean even like scenes with dramatic scenes like the one you showed me, was it 3 Men and Athena, and then the one with the guy in the bandana, where I think it's black and blue, and so the dramatic dialogue in those, for me, the thing that I like about the series a lot is the dialogue, and secondarily the characterization, and those two things melded together because it's like character-based dialogue, not just one-liner, which by comparison, Blake 7 is a lot more one-liner a lot of the time because it's like that's like Chris Boucher's style.
So, did you want me to read the summary of what?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the episode is titled "Nearer, My God, to Thee," which, in case anyone doesn't know, is a hymn. Aired on NBC originally October 14th, 1994. As mentioned at the beginning, was written by Jorge Zamancona and Tom Fontana, directed by Tim Hunter. And so the dead body of Catherine Goodrich, who was named Baltimore's Good Samaritan of the Year for opening a women's emergency services shelter, is found in a dumpster near a Catholic church in the middle of the night, completely naked except for a pair of white cotton gloves. Megan Russert, the new night shift commander with the homicide department, is assigned to handle the case, but Colonel Granger does not trust her with the politically volatile case and asks Giardello to help her. G calls his detectives in to help those of Russert, and they kind of clash with each other. As it says, Pendleton clashes with the foul-tempered Roger Gaffney, the primary detective on the Goodrich case. Russert explains Goodrich was beaten to death and they suspect she was raped, although the autopsy has not been completed yet. So far, the press is unaware of the killing. Russert's detectives voice their lack of respect for Russert based on her gender. Howard vigorously defends her, but when the two meet later, they do not get along. Pendleton and Bayless question Sister Magdalena, who worked with Goodrich at the shelter. She claims one of the abusive boyfriends of a shelter victim recently threatened Goodrich. She also claims Goodrich never wore white gloves. Pendleton later tells Bayless he is Catholic, but his faith has weakened over time. Actually, what he said is he fell. Gaffney believes the boyfriend is the likely killer, but Pendleton feels it was not a crime of passion, but of perversion, because the killer placed white gloves on the body. Gaffney calls Pendleton a boy, nearly leading to a fight until Russert intervenes. Meanwhile, Felton is distraught because his wife Beth has thrown him out of the house and will not let him see their kids. Nevertheless, Felton admits to Howard he is having an affair with another woman. Meanwhile, Lewis and Munch are in negotiations to buy a bar, but the owner will not lower her price and they must seek a third partner. They unsuccessfully pursue Bolender, but Bayless later agrees to invest in the bar. After several hours with no new developments, Russert is placed under further pressure when Matt Rhodes, an aggressive television reporter, reveals he knows about the murder and the white gloves. Russert claims if the white gloves are publicized, the detectives will lose their best lead, and she convinces Rhodes to hold off by promising to give him the exclusive story later. Dr. Shiner finishes the autopsy and reveals Goodrich was not raped, surprising the detectives. Pendleton and Bayless are sent to take another look at the crime scene. Giardello tells an exhausted Russert to go home and rest, promising to cover for her. Russert goes home and shortly later is visited by Felton. The two kiss, revealing Felton's affairs with Russert. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, Pendleton and Bayless find the locked door to a nearby shed has been violently ripped open. So they don't mention, of course, because it's not really part of the overall plot, but that opening scene where Lewis, Bolender, and Munch are talking about the soap opera they're watching and then television in general, and then Munch goes on
that was good.
sort of a thing about technology of the future. And he's right in like 90% of his predictions. Like the only thing he got wrong was he said there wouldn't be telephones because he didn't know that all the stuff he listed that was going to happen would be incorporated into the telephone. And it would be mobile telephones, of course.
Yeah, mentioned email.
Says, and even the last line when Bolender says, "I wish they'd bring back Hawaii 5.0," they have brought back Hawaii 5.0. So virtually every prediction they make in that opening is true. And the other funny part about it is that whole scene, or at least the stuff about how television networks do, was basically a big middle finger to the network for interfering with Homicide.
Yeah, that was good.
And in this episode, they introduce the character Megan Russert, who was basically their answer to the network saying, you need to add more sex appeal to the show and you need to add more female cast. So they brought in Russert and they said, okay, we'll do that, but we're still going to make, her a believable, shift commander. So that battle would continue with the network for a while, because every time the network would step in and be like, you need to do this and this, they would try to do it, but within it would make way that would make sense in the Homicide universe. And so sometimes they would actually do what the network wanted, but then make fun of the network at the same time. And that's what they did at the beginning of this episode with that scene. So, and you had this episode noticeably, this was after NYPD Blue had debuted, and all the hype about, how NYPD Blue had more adult language and nudity and stuff like that. So here in this first episode of the new season, we have a little bit more salacious stuff than what Homicide had in the first two seasons.
And I like the joke. Oh, we'll put more sex in the show, but it'll be on a screen.
Yeah. But, and then so they have obviously the affair going on with Felton and Russert, and they have, Bo and his wife, and played by a great actress, Mary Ward, that I always forget her name because she doesn't look like a Mary to me. But she was on One Life to Live, and I actually first saw her on a very short-lived TV show called TV 101 that was about high school students that did like a TV newscast. And several people from that show have gone on to be known for other things since then. So probably the best known would be Matt LeBlanc, who's best known as Joey from Friends, but also Terry Polo, who is the girl in the Meet the Parents movies with Ben Stiller, just to name a couple. Adam Dazay has been in several shows, including The Flash and Becker. Anyway, I'll go along on thing on TV 101, but Mary Ward played the character of Penny Lipton. So as soon as I see her, I always think that character, even though in Homicide she plays Bo's wife and is a very different character than. But that's another example of, she's a good actress. So whatever part she gets dropped into, she does usually a pretty good job of being believable in that role. And this one is because Morgan was watching with me. He just keeps talking about how psycho she is. So, and I think he made comments the first time. He thought that she was too similar to his mother in some ways, Morgan's mother, because of the whole thing, like calling him and then crying and hanging up on him.
I didn't like bringing this whole new team of crap written characters, and it takes the focus away from all of the good established characters. Like the Gaffney character was like a badly written, like straw man, bigoted type character. That wasn't
I don't think it was badly written, but to a point, but. Because in this episode, he didn't really need to be much beyond that. He's sort of established as being, he's a jerk, and that's again what you have to deal with in the situation. So once again, it brings the reality of it, and that he's also a sloppy detective. But yeah, but there'll be more of him. They'll flesh out his character a bit in the future.
But you see, I would have liked it if he was a smarter character and therefore more of a challenge for the other ones to go up against, rather than, you know what I mean? Like if he was at a sharp tongue.
Knowing, that you have done a very good job of not spoiling things in future Blake 7, and do the same thing with Homicide. But I'll say that there will be plenty of up against Gaffney. Right. So don't worry about that. There'll be more. But
was the guy that did the teleplay fired?
No.
Oh. It's just
I like this episode a lot better than you. Obviously, I think this story gets better than the beginning, but I still liked the beginning. There were a few lull moments, that kind of. I don't think it dragged. I thought it went by really fast, but there were certain things in it where, that aspect of it I could have done without.
Only halfway through did I feel like this is dragging.
Yeah, I liked the dynamic of having the other shift and them having to get along with each other. I thought that part was, and according to David Simon, is actually pretty realistic in terms of there is sort of that little rivalry that goes on between the shifts and little irritations of, one detective leaves the desk because in a certain condition and the other has a problem with it. So all that was very realistic in terms of the way that they, and I love the moment where Pendleton brings the chair down so that when Gaffney comes back, he'll fall out of it because he's expecting it to be higher. So it was a little moment where Pendleton gets his revenge.
I just didn't like. I mean, was that the other one? It was a separate guy from Gaffney. I thought both of them were not written as equals of our regulars. They were written
they're not supposed to be. They're
Stupid cops.
They're written as antagonists and to the primary cops, because the idea is that they don't really like each other that much.
Yeah,
but there's they start off from the beginning like they're. But again, it goes back to what I said before about if there was a conflict with outside the job, they would still have each other's back. They would still side with the other cops, but they're establishing that, there's that rivalry where they don't, have as much respect for the guys on the other shift. They see them with a suspicion and they're not as good, and that's why they're stuck on night shift and stuff like that.
It's just that I would like it if they were smarter characters and still assholes, still arseholes, but and had sharper tongues, and then therefore it's a better contrast there's a better antagonism with the regular guys who are also smart and right, and have like sharp tongues and witty. But it's like these ones just seem like badly written arsehole characters who are like half as smart as our regulars.
I didn't think they were badly written, but I would agree that they're limited in somewhat, and but they're not written to be
badly designed.
They're not written to be much beyond foils. So
yeah, that's what I mean.
But they are still written as being, as being realistic, because, like I said, the real cops, that were researched for the book, said some of the same things about the guys on the other shift. It was sort of like, they had those same kind of feelings about them. So what the artistic license takes is basically it only shows you one side of them. It shows you the antagonistic for the main characters, because the idea is to make the audience, side with the main, the characters we already know. And they establish Russert. I think part of it also is to have her stand out as different, because she comes across as the voice of reason, among these cops that are all making jokes to themselves about how she doesn't deserve the job,
Right. But in terms of antagonism, like, just the example where both sides are strong, has to be stronger. So, for instance, when you have Felton and Pendleton going at each other, they're equal. They're both smart, and they're both like it's an equal match. Whereas, and also when, like, for instance, in Blake 7, where you got Blake and Avon, and it's like they're both like strong, and it's not like Avon's written as a crap character. It's like they're on an equal footing. And so,
well, if you want to start doing straight up comparisons, there's some other characters that are not on equal footing on that show. So.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. And like you're just saying, that guy is. But anyway, I'm not doing spoilers.
But one of the aspects I really liked about this episode was, again, that Homicide brings that sort of harsh reality and like twists a little on things where, it's not always so cut and dried, because Howard is the one that, she's kind of sticking up for Russert as a, defending her as she deserved the position. But then when she actually like meets her and talks to her, she ends up calling her a bitch. So it's like you still established that.
Did she do that? Call her a bitch.
You missed that part?
What, to her face?
Yeah, well, no, as she walked away, she said it under her breath, but that's what she said.
That was good. That was good.
Because she's, because basically Russert's just saying Howard just standing around when they're, and she's not really just standing around, but at the time it looks like that, and Russert's trying to, like, it does a good dynamic where, she's brought into the other situation, because Howard is worried about all the stuff that's going on with Bo and his wife, and she's distracted by that. And then, she's been trying to, like, be the, I'm standing up for the female in the force thing. And then all of a sudden when she's confronted with her, she's kind of like, I've been defending you. And then you start getting on me. So, yeah.
I mean, like, for instance, when she had the argument with the guy, again, Gaffney, it's like, she, like, comes up with all these good points, and he's like this dumb, bigoted character, and
yeah, but he had some closed cases on his sheet when they showed that on the board, so obviously he does, to a point, know what he's doing.
Yeah. Anyway,
from the start, before you even see him, Pendleton, rags on him, about he couldn't find a lead if it was, whatever he says, but basically, from the beginning, he doesn't have any respect for him anyway. So there's a mutual respect there between those two.
Yeah, I'm just like, and like talking about going back to the first episode again. I've like flogged this point about him not being the equal. Like I said, with the car scene where you've got and again where you've got when he goes, for instance, when you got Felton going on the mission with Pendleton. Like Felton is saying things that are getting at Pendleton. You can see the equals. You can see that Felton's a smart character. And it is that thing, SDPs versus SFPs. And like I said, if Gaffney was written as smart as Felton, where like he could like give these wisecracks that would get at Frank,
but like
other
I said,
than
that was
boy.
really the point in this episode. He's supposed to be portrayed as inferior to Pendleton. And,
Yeah, that's my point. It's just the design like that. Is I would have done it differently, but but it is what it is.
Yeah, like I said, it's like it's the job. You know, I have people at my job that I don't particularly like that much, and I know that I'll limit what I say since this is recorded hangout. But I'll just say that there are people that I have to work with that if I had a choice, I wouldn't work with them. And if I were to portray them in fiction and do it accurately, people would probably say certain things about them based on certain ways that I would show. They would still be realistic. But someone could say, "Oh, this character is not written smartly." Well, there's a reason for that, because in that situation, they're not going to come off that way.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just a subjective thing that where I don't like these cannon fodder type. I always like it when both characters are smart and it's like an evil battle of wits rather than some dumb bigoted.
We'll say that sometimes that happens in real life and sometimes it doesn't, and so that's kind of the thing is that they've established that the majority of the criminals that they go up against are stupid, and that that the times when you have a smart criminal are the exception, but it does happen, and they'll feature some of those, and without giving too much away, this particular case that they're focusing on in the first episode obviously wasn't solved right away. They're not dealing with someone who is stupid, at least not stupid enough to give himself away really fast.
Yeah, so like comparing it to previous episodes, like I said, like for instance, 3 Men and Athena, where the older black guy was like the equal of them, and he did make points about that's what I mean, more of a battle of wits.
Well, I'll just say, just wait on that, because this story arc was obviously one of the ones, he'd already had a few chances to shine, but this is where Pendleton will get a chance to face off against some closer to equals, I would say.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And he'll have more opportunities as the show goes on. But again, what I love about the show is that they always have painful reminders that things don't always go how they should go, including that the smarter, more competent people are not always the ones that get put in positions of power or given favorability, in certain situations.
Yeah, so it kind of hammers.
It kind of hammers that point home many times over the course of the series, and doesn't take the easy way out, except when absolutely forced to by the network.
You see, I also think that there might be a political thing where, because this character is a bigoted character, they probably can't imagine that he would be smart and bigoted.
Well, I don't think that's the
case. That's speculation.
I think you can imagine that. In fact, I think that was actually one of the best things about NYPD Blue is that they made, the guy who became the breakout main character of the show, Andy Sipowicz, they established him as a
him, yes.
He was smart, yeah.
That was,
so
yeah.
He's like the best detective on the force, but also a bigot.
Yeah, that was great. Great writing.
And they force you to deal with that throughout the course of the series, where he's sort of like, the hero, anti-hero, depending on how you look at it, depending on what the circumstances are.
Yeah.
And I would say that, not to that extent because he's never a main character, but I will say, like I said earlier, without spoiling too much, that Gaffney is more developed later on.
Oh, good.
So you will get to see a little bit more of him that isn't just.
That reminds me. I mean, I never watched it, but I do remember like bits of the Sipowicz character in terms of like showing and like being given information about how well he was designed and that balance of traits. Where yes, that's how you do it. Yes, as you exactly said, that's a perfect example, a good version of like a competent character, but has got some bigoted traits within them.
And again, I can't say too much without spoiling stuff, but there's another character that comes along in the future that is not Sipowicz, but they do a very good job of having him be a character that you can root for, but still get ridiculously frustrated with by certain things that he does and says. So it's it's comparable in the way that, that theme of like smart people can sometimes do stupid things or reckless things, and and so it was funny to me. It's sort of unrelated, but it's along the same lines that I was listening to a radio show earlier today, and they were talking about Donald Trump, but the funny part was that they were like so incredulous for what they were saying about how Trump is, but I was like, it could have read out of somebody's like, handbook for like dealing with ESTPs or whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Because it was like, they were like, in all the time, we've never had a presidential candidate that lied so much for no reason. They were like, we've had people that lied to cover things up, but we've never had somebody that just seems to lie for the sheer fun of it because he can't help himself.
What is weird with ESTP is like, it's how intelligent they can be, yet the way they come off is like, is sometimes as dumb and like immature, and it's like, whoa, and it's that fantastic juxtaposition where half the time they're really smart and the other time they come off as loutish.
Yeah. So that, and my critically acclaimed video, ESTP's Why, covers some of those aspects.
Much better than I've just explained. 10 times better.
Yeah, so I did like the twist of them finding out that the victim was not raped, that it was not at least a traditional sex crime, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So there's more to it, and Pendleton is sort of pursuing that angle because he's already thinking about the motive. Again, the difference, like where Felton said he doesn't think about the why. Pendleton is thinking about the why, and he's thinking that he says the gloves are the key, because that in his mind he's ruling out all these things that are generally would be more suspicious. If she was raped, if she was just beaten and thrown in a dumpster but didn't have anything else done to her, but the fact that someone put the gloves on her and put her in church, that there's a message being sent, is what he's trying to get at, is what is the the real story here, because it goes beyond just the typical things that we deal with most of these murders.
I think a big thing is that I watched it when I was tired, and when I'm tired I get intolerant.
Yeah, I understand. I can be the same way, but it depends on what it is. Like I said, with comedy, I can sometimes appreciate it more when I'm tired because I'm just there to laugh. So goofy stuff will make me laugh even more. And so I actually laughed more at this episode than I probably did at the previous times I saw it, because of how those little things that they have, like Howard, with her little brick under her breath at Russert after she's been defending her, and then the stuff with Bolender was great because he just sticks to his guns about, yeah, I'll let you buy me breakfast, but I'm still not going to invest in your bar. And they have the cook who's totally not down with the program of selling the idea of the bar. Says, we tried breakfast 6 months ago and it failed. Why do you think she's trying to dump the place?
I think that one of the aspects of why you found it funny is the relatability of it, in terms, because you've been involved in the restaurant trade.
Yeah, that's part of it. And yeah, I love the way when Munch is talking to Stanley, and then Lewis comes around the corner. Stan,
Right, yeah. I mean, I just think that I would have liked it a bit more if the dialogue was as sparkling as previous, especially in those comedy scenes. It was, but again, this is just a subjective being like picky, being very picky in that, because I do remember some very sparkling dialogue, thinking with the comedy, I really like this because it's like little bits that are coming out of character, and
Well, I would agree. As I recall, I think I gave the first the pilot episode, first episode, either a 10 or a 9, or but it was close to 10.
Mm.
This one I would probably give an 8. So I liked it quite a bit, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's quite the quality of the first episode either. But that was a high standard. Not every episode's going to hit that. And as a season premiere, I think it did. It did throw you into enough stuff that definitely had me wanting to see what happened the next week. And so obviously that was the idea, is to just kind of be the hook and lead you into
But
stuff. So.
I think for me that this is my equivalent of Bounty and Cygnus Alpha.
Okay.
Well, I think you gave Cygnus Alpha 2 and Bounty 2.5.
All right. Well, then I got to give you credit for being a little more fair to it then, because you didn't give it a 2. So.
No. And like I said, it only for me dragged in the second half of the final 10. But I was tired at the time, and what? But yeah, and that's a big thing. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I got over the good points. I mean, talked about especially someone like Lewis has in previous episodes, and Crissetti as well. They have a lot of funny lines that come out of their characters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little throwaway line in this one that Crissetti just went on vacation to Atlantic City, and so yeah, he was missing for sure. But, he could have provided a little more humor, but obviously they were trying to introduce the character of Russert, and they had to spend time on other things. So something has to be sacrificed in that, I guess. But I wanted to read this one little part in the production stuff about it, because part of it I sort of mentioned before, but Munch, Lewis, and Bayless discussed purchasing the Waterfront Bar. The Waterfront Bar was an actual Baltimore establishment near the Recreation Pier building, a Fells Point location where Homicide's police department scenes are shot. The actors spent so much time at the waterfront after filming that the owner, Mike Working, joked the bar should be on the show, which prompted Barry Levinson to ask the writers to work the setting into the series. Business at the real waterfront increased by 20% after it was worked into the show. So another case of the series getting some people some money.
Yeah, I like these kind of behind the scenes notes.
Yes. NEARER, My God to Thee starts with a cold opening featuring Bolender, Munch, and Lewis watching television and discussing how network executives force producers to add gratuitous sex to their shows. Tom Fontana said this was a joke about NBC and the new request they made for the show. It also refers to the fact that NEARER, My God to Thee introduced more sexual content to the series, including the affair between Felton and Russert. Fontana said NBC Entertainment President Warren Littlefield called him to say he found the scene funny. So yeah, he got the joke.
Yeah, and Seinfeld did similar things when it had episodes like the pilot, and again poking fun at NBC.
Oh, and you'd asked me about what Homicide's competition was. This also says that at the time, this was the first episode that aired on Friday, which would have been eventually would stay its time slot for the rest of the show, and it was actually the first thing they were up against on CBS was Picket Fences. Later on, it would be Nash Bridges, but on the same.
It was a big. That got to England. That did Nash Bridges.
Yeah, Picket Fences was the one with Tom Skerritt, where it was, he had gotten known from Twin Peaks or whatever, and it was supposed to be kind of they tried a bunch of copycat shows for Twin Peaks. There was supposed to be this idea of the small town setting, but weird stuff is going on, and that was kind of one of them. I never really watched it, but apparently quite a few people did. As far as reviews, the episode received generally positive reviews. Alan Pergament of the Buffalo News called it a powerful opener for the season, calling it at least as strong as the recent second season premiere of NYPD Blue, a rival police drama series on ABC. He praised the religious themes in the superb cast, particularly the performance of Andre Braugher, who he called an energetic actor with a magnetic presence. Larry Bonko, television columnist with the Virginian Pilot, called the Homicide episode better than NYPD Blues, which he also praised. Bonko called it goose pimply TV that falls into the category of TV that is too good for TV. Particularly praised the witty dialogue that Ben loves so much, and the performance of Ned Beatty and especially Brower, who said he steals this series away. David Khaled, author of Homicide: Life on the Street, unofficial companion, called the White Glove murder story arc an attempt by Homicide to recapture the success of the Dina Watson storyline, a reference to the case about an 11-year-old prominently featured throughout the first season. So you had said something about, it's a two-parter. The first season, they kind of established that they would, some stories would extend, beyond one episode, then that was more realistic. And that was actually something the network kind of discouraged, because they wanted to try to make more of them sort of self-contained, so that people could follow the show if they were new to it. So they basically compromised in that they had more things that would be wrapped up, but they would extend them over at least a few episodes, but probably not over 6 or 7. Most things wouldn't continue. Now, there were some exceptions to that. There are certain storylines that will go beyond that later on, but they didn't limit it to that case being the main focus over the time.
So I think when they did the Dina Watson story, they had other threads going on as well, and I think this story would have benefited from a third story.
Yeah. They did have other stuff going on, but like I said, it didn't. There wasn't another a case being discussed, really. It was as far as the homicide case, it was all focused on that one thing.
I mean, I remember saying before, in one episode, there were 3 things going on, and it was totally different cases where you wouldn't get confused between them. And I like that. So, and you liked to Blake 7, like Deliverance, where you had 3 plots going on, and it gave it a pace.
For me, it's what I've always said is it's not as much about a number of plots to me as it is just a number of characters that kind of have their own agenda, their own perspective, their own kind of point of view that's being established. So it's not so one track in terms of you're only getting the point of view of one character or whatever. You're getting this. It doesn't matter to me as much that there's a bunch of different things going on as it is that the different characters are seeing it from different perspectives. So it's some things I'll love special episodes of certain things. The Simpsons did one. Supposedly it was based on a movie, I think, but I never saw the movie and I don't remember the name of it. So there's a lot of things Simpsons has parodied or done sort of versions of that I've never seen the original, and I still loved it anyway. So it just shows how good Simpsons is. But they had one where they followed the same story, but from the perspective of 3 different characters as separate stories. So they did it was Lisa's day and then Bart's day and then Homer's day, or I forgot what the order was, but they basically told the same story, but they would have elements in it that would cross with the other stories, and then when you saw the next perspective, you would see how they saw the same scene, but also other stuff they did that was not part of that story. So it was really well done, and so that kind of thing I love is where you have, and you mentioned Seinfeld, they did some of that too, where they'd have stories that crossed over each other but weren't exactly lining up. It was just, some things would come together in the end, or, there would be elements that would be continued.
Right. So that was set on, say, the same day and from different points of view.
Right.
They did that on 2 episodes of Battlestar Galactica where they went over the same events from the point of view of the other side, and that was very effective.
Mm-hmm. They've also had a few shows, including I think Seinfeld, maybe, where they basically did the entire plot backwards, where they started at the end and showed
I remember that
back to where it began. So I like those kind of things when they if it was like that every episode, it probably would get tiresome. But the fact that you can throw that kind of thing in, and Homicide over its 7 seasons would have some episodes that definitely kind of were a twist on the usual story presentation. So anyway, I can look forward to those. So obviously on this one, at least in our tired selves, I liked it better than you did, but that's okay, because with Blake 7, we're getting the first impressions, and that's cool. So I I approach Homicide because I love it so much. As yes, obviously I love it if the person I'm sharing it with loves it as anywhere close to as much as me. But I don't expect everyone to, and I know
Hmm.
that and the same that I felt the same way about Doctor Who is like almost everybody that I ever showed the first episode of Doctor Who, An Unearthly Child from 1963, like to a person, like when they saw that first one, they wanted to see more. It hooked them right from the start as to what's going to happen next. And so I have that sort of experience, which is like the ideal when you're sharing something with somebody. And then you have times where it's like right off the bat they're just not into it. So the fact that you've liked as much of Homicide as you have is still cool to me, even if it's not as much as me. But anyway, did you have anything else to say about this episode before we wrap this up?
Let me think about the scenes. I like the discussion about religion. It was just a particular case that I found, like the going around in. So I wasn't interested in the case, but like the things around it, and also I wasn't interested in Bo Felton's marriage thing. I wasn't interested in that plot thread.
See, I can say that I basically agree with you to a point, but the funny thing about that was how I discussed how from the start when I was watching it, I seemed to always be on the opposite side of Felton on a lot of things. But then this was actually the first episode really I really found myself feeling for him because of what was going on. And the funny thing about that is, of course, you can say, well, he's off having an affair, so it's not like he's not exactly true blue in this situation. But it's because I'm a father probably that when it comes to the situation of he can't see his kids, I can't help but feel for him on that score, and that his wife is it's not excusing anything that necessarily he's doing, but it's just I feel for him in terms of I think she's being a little bit extreme also. So I did feel for him as a character in that, even if I overall agree that I could have done without most of that. I didn't really mind that it was going on in the squad room as part of they're dealing with the case and he's getting the phone calls and all that stuff. Like that part, I think actually was pretty natural and flowed with. But the scene where he went home was and the scene at Russert's place, and I realized that was just put in there to establish that what was going on between them. And it was brief, so it wasn't like it dragged out there. It just, it was a quick scene. So, but overall, I really didn't find too much to complain about. I liked most of it. So.
The next episode of Break 7, the first episode of season 2, really good. I'd like to build it up, but I know your preference for no build up and to be surprised.
I could say that the next episode of Homicide is really good too, but of course I thought this one was really good, so you may not agree with me anyway. So.
Well, what I can say is like the 5th or 4th episode of Blake 7. I do not like the ones written by Alan Pryor. They're boring.
Anyway, I would say the next Homicide episode that the action picks up a bit. I'll just say that. That'll be our teaser for the next one for that.
Yeah. So like I said, I mean, I love Blake 7, but I will criticise the 4 or 5 stories written by Alan Pryor.
Yeah, and I'll have more to criticize in Homicide as we go on.
Yeah.
Like I said, I still, to this day, I've never seen a bad episode of it, so I'm not going to be.
Yeah.
There's not an episode that I'm ever going to be super harsh on, but there are some where I'll definitely say that this particular decision of where they went with the story I didn't like or I didn't need to see.
Yeah, that's the thing with this one. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call this one bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody, and join us next time for more Homicide.
Yeah. So that's goodbye for me, folks.
Bye.
And I'll stop this now, and Jeff and I will have a chin whack private. You'll never know what we said.